Greetings. My name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. On this edition is a special as we look at racism. How do we cope with racism in the workplace? And we're joined by Sister Khalilah Brann. She is self-identified as an anti-racism and equity consultant, a researcher, author, and she's the founder of Creed. Welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Well, in our last episode, we focused on our children. Now we're going to talk about how racism impacts us. Could you, for the sake of our talk to, particularly let's start off talking about yourself, your work in terms of dealing with and supporting people in this work?
So Creed is an educational diversity and equity consulting firm. Our main focus is on supporting teachers and parents in developing the positive racial identity development of the young people in their charge. However, or at the same time, we found that when we start working with teachers to talk about race in the classroom, we often find that the teachers are also struggling with race in the workplace. And so as we're pushing them to teach in a different way, they're like, oh, but you don't understand, this is happening with my colleagues, or this is happening with my supervisor, or this is happening with my subordinate. And so we started to do work around supporting the leadership, the administrative team. So we work with schools, we've worked with tech companies. We are currently working with the Human Resources Department of the Department of Education around what's happening in our work environments and how do we move into creating an anti-racist work environment.
So basically, a lot of times people say, you know, I'm not racist. What are you talking about? You know, give us an example of some of the subtle racism, and whether it's regardless of where you work, what type of subtle racist attitudes pop up?
As a society, we see racism as the KKK. That's it. That's racism. Well, no, when I say we, I mean white folks, because we don't, the collective we. So when we start throwing out, you're racist, that was racist, people are like, I'm not the KKK, I'm not burning down anything, so that couldn't be racist. So that's the first thing, identifying that racism is a system that privileges one group over the other, that centers whiteness over everything else. It takes us like months to get right there for people to understand that we're talking about a system. Now, of course, there's individual and interpersonal racism, and those are acts, and you can point those out. But what we do when we're talking about the workplace is to focus on the systemic ways that racism plays out in the workplace. So, in hiring practices. So you say, oh, I want to have a diverse staff, and they're like, I can't find any diversity, so everybody's white, and you have your token black person, your token Latino, your token Asian, and your token LGBTQ, and you're like, listen, we're diverse, right? It starts in, and this is racism and sexism, like who we expect to do certain things without thinking. It can go as far as, which has happened to me and probably every black woman I've ever known who is passionate or who speaks up for themselves, being pulled into your supervisor's office to talk about your tone, to talk about your facial expressions. Why are you looking at them like that? To talk about the way you speak, the directness in your voice, all of the things that you're just like, this is just my ways of being, but your ways of being is in direct conflict with white people's ways of being, and so therefore you have to change and assimilate. So in the workspace, it's about all the ways that they want assimilation to happen. Lots of times what we'll do is we'll start, we don't really start gently, but we'll get to a place where we're talking about microaggressions, micro-invalidations, micro-assaults, where it's like, you know, I had executive director or owner of a tech company, and he's like, you know, our secretary, she has new hair every week, and I just want to ask her, or he had asked her, like, what are you doing? And wow, it's so different, and his hands were all in her hair, and I said, no, right? So it's this weird thing, and it's really like pointing out to white people that black people and people of color are not your little dolls that you can experiment with, and that white people have to stop seeing individual black people as stereotypical tropes that they've grown up on. It comes, I had this one colleague, every time she saw me as a white woman, she'd be like, hey sis, you don't speak like that. Like, so why are you even doing it? That's why when we start talking about racism, we really have to start talking about those microaggressions and those micro assaults and validations that happen every day, and the cumulative effect of coming into a workspace every day and somebody saying something stupid to you or engaging you or being like, you're black, can you tell me about X, Y, and Z?
You become the specialist on Black America.
Yeah.
And people look to you to be the cultural ambassador to your community, not realizing that just like there's the different views within the white community, there's a diversity of views within the black community. So yes, that is a key. Generalization is definitely a concern. Now, let's look at in terms from the historical perspective.
Yes.
As you know, the legacy of slavery, and that one was one of the areas where we, being our ancestors, being forcibly forced to work for hundreds of years, and those attitudes. What are some of the things, the legacy of slavery, that has a lot to do with these attitudes?
Thinking that black people aren't as intellectual. So, you know, you might have an organization, especially when we're thinking education, schools or community organizations, where on the ground level there's a lot of black people, but as you move up, there are none. You're like, okay, so there's 30 black people on staff. We move up to the administrative leadership team, there's 18 people, nobody is black. So we're, you know, the intellectual capacity of blackness and how it plays out in hiring and moving up into things. Just the Starbucks incident that happened with these two young men, and the video came out yesterday that she took exactly 2 minutes to call the police.
Now, for the purpose of everyone, tell us about that incident.
So in Philadelphia at a Starbucks, two young black men went into the Starbucks. They were waiting for a business partner, a white man. They came in, one sat down, one asked to use the bathroom. There's a code. The manager told him, no, you can't get the code unless you are purchasing something. He was like, I'm not purchasing anything, went to sit down with his friend, and within 2 minutes, 6 cops had arrived and arrested them, booked them. They spent 9 hours in jail for trespassing. Essentially being in Starbucks, sitting and waiting for 2 minutes, which is what we all do. When I have to wait between things, I'm like, where's the nearest Starbucks? I'm just gonna sit here for 4 hours with my computer. And they were arrested. And so now Starbucks is closing, and I did tweet them. They're closing 8,000 of their stores in the United States on May 29th to do an anti-bias, unconscious racism training. And the manager has left. She was not fired. She left on her own. They are doing an internal investigation, which I believe that they should do. You know, they should not just be so quick to fire someone. They should do the investigation, then fire. But she left before they can do that. And so I'm intrigued. I can't wait to even get pieces of what that training is going to be like. What I know, and I did a training today, and you know, with the leadership team, and at the end, it was our last of 4 sessions. And the leader said to me, a white man, he said, you know, Khalilah, you were a little bit more aggressive than I thought we needed, but it was a good session. And I told him, my job is to, you know, move everyone across this continuum, but my other job is to make sure that the people of color in here are not here like midwiving you through this process, because that's what usually happens when we start to do anti-racism in the workplace. The people of color have to be like, it's okay, white person, I know you didn't mean it, get her some tissues. And so what Creed does is we're compassionate, but we center black and brown people first. So lots of times at the end, it'll be the black and brown people that go, wow, this was great. Like, this was the first time I haven't been in a session where I had to been like, oh, how do we, and I say I want everyone to be uncomfortable. When I go to do a session, I want everyone to be uncomfortable, not just the black people. So I want everyone to feel frustrated. I want everyone to be crying. I want everyone to feel like they're not being heard or whatever, because that's what black people go through every single day in their workplace.
Now, the thing that, and I just think about this whole thing about stereotypes and how a lot of these misconceptions about race come from these old stereotypes, whether they came from slavery or even ethnic stereotypes. Even certain ethnic groups are also have the victims, but of course, because of white supremacy, the people of color are the ones that impacted the most. How do we get past that? For example, making people face their uglies, so to speak, the ugliness of racism, the ugliness of stereotyping. How do people, what have been some of the reactions?
The way we get past seeing someone as just a stereotypical figure is we have to be able to be in a space together where we are able to humanize and individualize people. Like, I get to just learn you. You don't know how many white people have just been like, Khalilah, like, I just don't even think you're, like, I know you're black, but, you know, like you're so cool. And I'd be like, yeah, I know, like, right? So relationships, building relationships help. And at the same time, I was at a school on Monday that's really diverse, white, black, Asian, like really diverse. And I felt bad for those black kids because that diversity in a school only benefits white people, because then they get to see people as humans and they grow up and they're like, you're nothing like the person on TV. Wow, black people can be different. But what does it do for the black kid in that environment? It keeps them in a constant state of inferiority because the white people are like, oh, look, right? So relationships are key, but it's how do we have equitable relationships? Lots of times when I'm working with staff, there's one conversation that happens with white people. And on my Creed staff, I have 2 white educators. And so we'll separate. We'll take the white people and put them in one room, and we take the people in color and we put them in another room. And because we need different things. So for me, with the people of color, it's about getting rid of that little man in your head that tells you to take everything and not make a big deal out of things and don't do this and don't do that. It's about really starting to train and say, no, you deserve to bring your whole entire self into this space. You deserve to be here. You deserve to, and you deserve to tell someone when they have passed boundaries, when they have done something disrespectful, and when they cry, because Lord, do they cry? You keep on going. You don't stop, right? You do that. And then for white people, my colleague Erin always says, it's about teaching them how to be grateful for when a black person tells them about themselves, how to do it in gratitude, how to be take enough humility to say, oh wow, okay, I receive that, and it is my duty to make changes. So in line with that, because as I said before, I always see that connection between that relationship on the plantation of the quote-unquote sassy black woman or the strong, outspoken black person. They were whooped. They were the ones who were whooped. They were sent to the field. And then and it was like simply a subtle punishment, a punch to say to the others, if you step out of line, if you speak out, this is what's going to happen. And it, again, plays itself in the workplace, too, where you, like you said, the outspoken person is kind of told, look, you know, that's not, you know, to kind of keep people in line. And as you said, getting people to the point where say, look, as a human being, I deserve respect. I also have should be given the same opportunities for advancement and not kind of that glass ceiling. I mean, and even in terms of society will say, this is the first black woman, the first black man to become head janitor of XYZ company. To me,
is that really, yes, it's good for that person, but if he's the only person that made executive and the rest of the people of color are still on bottom of mid-management, there's a lot of work, because some companies feel, well, I got one black male, one black female who's, so why are you complaining, you know?
So a lot of the work, this is where it gets emotional, right? Let me start with teachers and then I'll go to private sector. A lot of work with teachers is me digging into, what are you afraid of? What do you think is gonna happen? What do you think is gonna happen? So first of all, we're all unionized, so let's talk there. Second of all, if you're an excellent teacher and your students are doing well, and I like to say, and you have your receipts, trust me, you're gonna be fine. But really, we live in a world steeped in fear, and in a world steeped in like fear of not having. And so we're always afraid that if I speak up or if I do this, I won't have X, Y, and Z. So a lot of the work that I do is about breaking down that fear, understanding that we live in an abundant world where you will always be taken care of. And that's a whole psychological, emotional, spiritual thing. But it's something that we have to do in order to get people to understand that you deserve to speak up for yourself in every space. So that's one. Two, outside, when we're talking about 9 times out of 10, it is the leader who has invited Creed in to do this work. So not only do we do the work with the staff, we do the work with the leader around what's your hiring practices, what's your promotional practices, and how can we embed systems that go against your natural system. Like, this candidate was good, but I just don't think that they'll fit in here. Ooh, what does that mean? What does fitting in here mean? Fitting in into what, right? How white people are afraid of conflict, and they believe that they have a right to comfort, that no matter what, they should feel comfortable. So we gotta dig into fitting in here means that you get to remain comfortable. What would be different about having this person here? Also, who's making the criteria for what we need on our team? So you're like, oh, I need someone. I worked with a group. We need someone with I think that they just said a reputable college. Reputable college meant Ivy League, right? And so if reputable college means Ivy League, then you're automatically knocking a whole bunch of people out. One of my last school-based positions, I asked to be a part of the hiring committee, but not the committee that made the final decision. I wanted to be the search committee. And being on the search committee, and even having a search committee, right? So putting all those things in, every single teacher that came in that door was Black or Latino. And my principal said to me, I could never find all of these, but I don't care which one you hire. I've given you 35. Please hire any of them. So how do we also, from the leadership point, create systems? A search team that has a diverse group membership, right? And that's one team, they do the search. Another team does the interview and does the hiring practices. How can we really start? And then what are we really looking for? We value like organization and things of that nature way more than we value people who are relational and engaging. I used to always say when I hired a teacher, I don't care if the teacher doesn't know the content. I can teach them the content. They can learn, they can read every book. But if they don't know how to relate to kids and families, and if they don't know how to relate to Black and brown kids and families in the hood, I don't care. They can be a genius in mathematics. It will not work, because I don't need a genius in mathematics. I need a relational math teacher who can engage the kids and encourage the kids to learn.
So when you say that from perspective of education, we want someone who's culturally sensitive.
No, I don't want them to be. No, I don't want them to be sensitive.
You want them to be relational.
I want them to be relational. I want them to be responsive. What does sensitivity mean?
Well, let's look at that. When I think about the fact that, for example, there's some people who are in education but don't like children. If you're in education, you don't like children, you shouldn't be in the classroom. So definitely you have to like children.
You have to love them.
You have to love them.
Because they're not always likable.
Yes, and like you're right, you have to love them, but you also have to not come in with baggage that says this child who happens to be of African ancestry or Latino is not able to perform and not, in your mind, is not going to succeed, whereas this other child who's non-Black or Latino or of color, because Asian, is going to, so you can't have these notions.
So that to me is too ideal. We are born believing in white supremacy and anti-Blackness. We're born with that, so I can't make that as a criteria. Okay. What I can do is like, okay, you're here. Mm-hmm. You may not even know that you have these feelings. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna point them out. Mm-hmm. Are you willing to do the work or not? Mm-hmm. Because I had a bias against Black people, being raised from the Caribbean. My household when I was little, you don't trust Black Americans, you don't trust Africans. Oh, Black Americans are lazy. That was what I heard in my house. That was my bias. The only people that I thought were good enough were other West Indian people. Everybody else was below. I had to transform that. Mm-hmm. Right? So everybody comes in with the bias. Mm-hmm. I just want to know, after I point it out, after I've given you the evidence, mm-hmm. what are you going to do now? Are you ready to face it now? Mm-hmm. And that's the work of leadership. If we want to create an anti-racist world, if we want to, as Baba Harry Belafonte said, burn it down. Mm-hmm. Burning it down is the decolonization of our minds, our practices, and what we do. Recognizing, oh, wow, I am racist, prejudiced, anti-Black, anti-Latino, anti-LGBTQ. Wow, I have a hatred, a feeling, a disgust, a disdain for a group of people, everyone that falls in that group. Mm-hmm. Being aware of that is one step. It's the biggest step. Mm-hmm. All the other steps are easier.
Mm-hmm. So once someone is aware, once you go through the process of getting people to accept the fact that people have these biases, because some people say, I'm unbiased, and that's probably the first. Then the point is, are they willing to change? And that's the thing, are they willing to step outside of that mindset to say, I'm dealing with a diverse world, a diverse culture, I'm going to have to deal, if I'm going to work in a neighborhood of predominantly children of African ancestry, predominantly Latino children, I have to learn to respect this culture and be able to give that child the same level of support that I would of children in my community. And that's something, and I'm saying not just teachers, also police officers.
Oh, everyone.
Everybody has to say that, cultural sensitivity is needed.
Sensitivity. That's not sensitivity. Okay, what you just described is not sensitivity.
What is it?
It is humanity. Sensitivity means like you're sensitive to something. I don't like teachers who are sensitive to something. I like people who are anti-racist. There's a difference between being, I always say, good white people and anti-racist. Good white people watch bad things happen all the time. Mm-hmm. They're like, ooh, that's horrible. Ooh, I wouldn't do that. I don't need any more of those. Exactly. I need the person that's going to interrupt. So I need you to be a cultural interrupter. I need you to not be sensitive to the kid. If you're a police officer in my neighborhood, I need you to actually, one, love your job and love the people that you're here to serve. Love. I need you to see their humanity, because they going to get on your nerves. They going to do bad things. And when they do bad things, as a teacher, as a fireman, as a police officer, the only thing that you'll have is that love in the midst of them doing horrible things. Sensitivity is not going to make it through when somebody spits on you. I've had a kid throw a chair at me. Sensitivity is not going to help me with the chair being thrown at me, right? It has to be a deep, abiding love. And what it really is stop being afraid. Why do you hate people who are LGBTQ? Because you're afraid of something. Why do you hate Black people? Because you're afraid of something. What are you afraid of? That's the work. That is the work when I'm working with organizations. What are you afraid of? What's the worst thing that's going to happen if you stop being afraid of this person and allow yourself to see them as human? I don't need cultural sensitivity. I need you to be culturally responsible, culturally responsive, culturally relevant, and culturally loving.
With that said, and particularly I think that said it all, is if people are interested in understanding particularly their, what that means and how they can get their organization to get to that level, how could they contact you?
They should go to my website, CREED, Culturally Responsive Educators of the African Diaspora. That the CREED is spelled with an A, so it's CREADNYC.com. And you can email me, you can look at our resources, you can look at our daily blog and the work that we do. You can also find us on YouTube at CREED NYC, Instagram, Facebook.
Well, with that said, it was, again, we know we got to get you back here, and certainly time goes with, but certainly the points that were raised are so critical. We want to thank you, Sister Khalilah, for the work you're doing and continue to do, and we look forward to having you back as we explore the topics as relates to becoming and getting people to the knowledge of respecting and embracing their humanity and being able to accept others. Again, on that note, thank you so much.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Let's welcome Joe Patan.
They jumping in the city, West Indian happy, happy whole time for Labor Day. I tell you, no problem, for we take over Harlem Sunday, eve of Labor Day. Virgin Islands crew in town, St. Thomas, St. Croix, and St. John. When you hear the